Hello, my amazing students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're talking about Lesson 85, which is all about opposites. Have you ever played opposite day? Mom might say, "It's time to clean up your room." And you say, "Oh, but Mom, it's opposite day, so it's really time to mess up my room." Or, "Mommy, can I have a chocolate bar?" And Mom says, "No." And you say, "Oh, goody, it's opposite day, so that means I get a candy bar." That's kind of a fun game, but doesn't usually work that way, does it? All right, so here we're talking about opposites. Well, what are opposites? So here you can see on my little tiny number line, I have a 2, and then on the other side of the 0, I have a -2. 2 is 2 units to the right of the origin, which is another name for 0. And -2 is 2 units to the left of the origin, or the 0. They're both the same distance from the 0, but they are in opposite directions. So, I'll let you see who I have visiting me in my room is my cat. Whoops, and there's another one over there. Maybe the other cat will come on the screen. Oh, there, you can see her over there. This one, her name is Bones. And this one over here's name is Booth. And we have 2 black cats at our house. So, 2 and -2 are exactly the same distance from 0, but they're on opposite sides of the 0. So they are called a pair of opposites. -2 is the opposite of 2. And 2 is the opposite of -2. And a -2 is the same thing as the opposite of 2. Okay, so the opposite of 2 would be -2, and then the opposite of the -2 would be 2 again. This could get very confusing. Every time we take another opposite of, we swing to the opposite side of the 0. So 2 is on the right-hand side of the 0. If we say the opposite of 2, we swing to the left-hand side, and it's -2. When we take the opposite, it is the same as multiplying by a -1. So the opposite of 2 is a -2. And -1 times 2 is a -2. So every time you take a negative and you see it in front, it's really the same thing as a -1. So here we have negative, -2. But your book is saying sometimes it's easier to think of opposite of the opposite of the opposite of 2. All right? So we know that every time we say opposite of, we started with 2, we swing to -2. We swing back to +2. We swing back to -2. Okay, so the answer is -2. And we're going to see that as we do our work, if we have a negative, 3 negatives, then it's going to wind up being a negative answer. But if we have an even number of negatives, like if we didn't have that negative there, then we would have the opposite of the opposite of 2. Well, 2 opposites mean you don't have to jump at all. Okay, so we would get a +2 if we only had 2 opposites. And if we had 4 opposites, then we would jump back again to our original position. So the opposite of 2 moves it to the left. This one moves it to the right. This one moves it to the left. This one moves it back to the right. And we end up with a positive 2 again. So if we had an even number of negatives, it stays positive 2. If we have an odd number of negatives, then it's going to go to negative 2. Opposite of the opposite. So let's go back to our original here. Negative, negative, negative is the opposite of the opposite of the opposite of 2. Which 2, negative 2, positive 2, negative 2. Every time you add another negative, you flip signs again. Pretty easy. So I have a cat over here, and I have a cat over there. They don't often pose together like that. So, here's our rule. If we have an even number of negative factors, and remember, factors are things multiplied together, the answer is positive. But if we have an odd number of negative factors, then the answer is negative. So, here we have an example. We have negative, 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 negative 7. We're going to read it opposite of. Opposite of, the opposite of, the opposite of, the opposite of, the opposite of 7. That gets very wordy. So let's just learn how to do it. So we started with 7, negative 7, positive 7, negative 7, positive 7, negative 7. That's one way to do it, is just count backwards and flip from positive to negative every time. Excuse me. The other way to do it is to count total negative signs. Negative, 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 negative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is odd. Since we have an odd number of negatives, that means our answer is negative. Odd means negative, even means positive. So we get a negative 7. Here we have 2 different types of problems, but they both work the same way. Opposite of, opposite of, opposite of, opposite of 6. Okay, so we start with a negative 6, positive 6, negative 6, positive 6. The answer is a positive 6. Now let's choose our sign rule. 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. That's an even number of negatives, and it will be positive. Okay. Now, on this one, we don't just have a stack of negatives. We have negative numbers multiplied together. But the same rule applies. When we multiply 2 negative numbers together, we get a positive. But when we multiply a third one, we're going to go back to a negative. So we're going to get a negative answer, and we have an 8 times a 5, which is a 40. So the answer should be negative 40. Now, let's look at our signs. We have a negative, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 is odd. Odd means negative. Negative 40. Pretty easy. Okay, here's our last example, and then we're going to do some practices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives multiplied together. 6 is even. We expect a positive answer. So I don't have to worry about the ones because anything times 1 is just the same number. So 4 times 9 is 36. Positive 36 is my answer because I have an even number of negative numbers. Okay, here's your first practice. I'm going to do this one for you. So we have a negative, negative, negative 3. Okay, so we're going to count the negatives. 1, 2, 3. Odd number of negatives means a negative 3. So the answer is negative 3. So now let's check it going the other way. Negative 3, positive 3, negative 3. Yeah, we get a negative 3. Okay, so that's your first one. Your second one. Okay, now this is a negative, 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 negative 2. So since we have 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives, 4 is even. we're going to have a positive 2 as an answer. We can use our other method. Start with a negative 2, positive 2, negative 2, positive 2, and we get positive 2. Okay, so I did the first 2 for you. So now look at this one. This one's a little different because we're multiplying. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. But the sign rule is the same. 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. Even number of negatives becomes positive. So we know the answer is positive, and then 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 more is 8, times 2 more is 16. So the answer is positive 16. Okay? Now, this one is negative, 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 negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negative signs. 5 is odd. Odd means we stay negative. So negative 5 is the answer. So let's go backwards. Negative 5, positive 5. Negative 5, positive 5. Negative 5, confirmed. Okay? Now, the last example, I'm not going to do the whole thing because to me it looks a little bit ridiculous. Okay? But what we are going to do, so we have a negative 242 times 41 times a negative 17 times a negative 22 times a negative 3 times a 4 times a negative 7 times a 5 times a negative 3 times a negative 2. Well, goodness. I'm going to get out my calculator. But let's figure out the signs, okay? Every time we see a negative sign, we will count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 negatives. That is an odd number of negatives. Therefore, our total answer will be negative. Now, negative what? I don't know. I would have to go get a calculator because I am not multiplying all that out on the board. But you should get a negative number. Now, let's check that. Let's start with negative, and then every time we see a negative, let's just switch to positive. Negative, there's no switch there because it's a positive number. Negative, positive, negative, positive. Jump over the positive number, negative, positive, negative. We're going to have a negative number, and you can go figure out how to multiply all of that together if you want to do it. Or you can just start your homework. This is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.